Hey, welcome to the National Film Society podcast. Today, my guest, you might know from films such as Colma. He was the screenwriter and composer, and he's also the director of films such as Fruit Fly, I Am a Ghost, and my personal favorite, Bitter Melon, and the forthcoming film, The Secret Art of Human Flight, which will be premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival on June 8th and will also be playing on June 9th and June 13th. So I'd like to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, my brother from another mother, HP Mendoza. What's up, HP?
What's up? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. No, thank you, and congratulations on the new film. That's pretty awesome, and the Tribeca screening. How you feeling?
Good, thank you. It's good. It's overwhelming.
I want to get into that, but I actually want to start off by asking you something. So you and I, we've been friends since 2010. We met at the Disorient Film Festival in Eugene, Oregon. And we, kind of known a lot of the same people before then. And since then, we've had tons of conversations like sober, not sober, in person, over the phone, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever medium you want to call it. And we've talked about everything like craft, just films we love, career stuff, all that stuff. But one thing I've actually never asked you is how'd you get into filmmaking? Like what drew you to filmmaking in general?
It's funny. I wonder if anyone's asked me that, because I don't know if I have like a standard answer, right? But I feel like I must have talked about at least this. I remember my father going off to Vegas for a while and coming back. What he would do is he would come back with a bunch of gifts for us. And we'd say, oh, he came back with gifts and toys and all this stuff. And we never knew what it was, but it was his way of making up for the fact that he never called my mom while he was gone. And he would just come back with like stuff to like make us happy. And one of the things he came back with one time was a Super 8 camera with a bunch of film, Mm-hmm. And I remember I was like, oh, it's how do you work the video? And I remember he was like, no, this is film. And there I was just kind of like shooting stuff as a like 6-7-year-old kid, just kind of like running around shooting 3 minutes of film at a time. And what I was doing, I wasn't even making movies first. I was like using my Hot Wheels tracks and like shooting like on the track because I was trying to make a motion simulator like Back to the Future in Universal Studios. So we could project it in the living room and I would move the couch while my family sat on the couch and I would make a theme park ride. And I think after that, what happened was it became a lifelong goal for me to use that camera or whatever camera I could to make The Wizard of Oz. Like I play it back in my head now, it's like, wow, I didn't want to do anything original. I just wanted to make The Wizard of Oz. So I would like use my stuffed animals or my action figure, whatever I had, and I would just like make The Wizard of Oz. And I would literally just be like doing like line for line from The Wizard of Oz and like just doing the scenes. And what happened was I think that because that was kindergarten, and from there, once I went to the first grade, I just caught a glimpse of a bunch of kids rehearsing something, and I had to ask what that was. And they're rehearsing for this cool play. And I remember I wanted in on that. So I did. I got to learn about what the drama club was. And in my head, I said, this is lots of fun. It'd be better if I could use my camera, though. So it's like I knew like deep down inside, it's like as much as I love the theater kids, I'd be with them, but I still wanted to make movies. That's the earliest I could think of. I wish it was like higher culture than that. But I think that's what got me into it.
No, man, that's crazy because at least for me, it was like, I saw Do the Right Thing when I was a kid and I really loved what I thought filmmaking could do. But like, it took me a while to actually get my hands on a camera, even if it was just like, a Super 8 thing or a video camera. And then once I got my hands on one, I was like, we'll see.
Right? It's like you get your hands on it and it's like, oh, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. That's what it was like for me dealing with sound, because Super 8 sound was tough. And I think it's also what happened when I finally went to college and started learning how to make film using film, and using the splicer. And I thought it was really cool. But at the same time, I had all these ideas in my head because like you, I'd seen Do the Right Thing. Like you, I'd seen these movies. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. And I got really into all these different filmmakers' techniques. And really what I wanted to do was not just Wizard of Oz. I wanted to make Citizen Kane. I wanted to make Boys in the Hood. And I think the reason why I was looking at Citizen Kane and Boys in the Hood is I was looking at like the world's youngest directors. And I remember splicing, and it was like 1994, and thinking, yeah, cool. I hope one day computers can do this, because I'm tired of like physically like cutting this film. And so I think that's akin to what you're talking about. I'm like, why does it have to be so hard?
So, Secret Art of Human Flight. I'm sorry, The Secret Art of Human Flight. I actually hate it when there's like a "the" and then people just knock it off the the title as if it doesn't exist. But it's a mystery. The logline: while mourning the death of his wife and fending off an ambitious detective who thinks he killed her, Ben, the main character, encounters a man who claims that he can teach him to fly. Now, I haven't seen the final version, full disclosure. But what drew you to this film? The way that's written and the title, I mean, it's quite a beautiful kind of premise. When you came to it, like what caught your attention?
Oh, so this is interesting. I feel like I'm about to be such a storyteller right now, because I'm going to tie that into your last question about how I got in the film. Because I feel like when I went from like Super 8 to watching movies and wanting to make Wizard of Oz, I wasn't the kid that like was 9 years old and watching Ingmar Bergman films. No, I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was watching E.T. I was watching, and then when I graduated to things that were more adult, it might have been like The Color Purple, right? Which is still Spielberg, right? Like these are all like big versions of cinema that are super big budget, and they're kind of, for lack of a better word, they're kind of engineered to draw some really big emotions out of you, right? And they're kind of designed for huge audiences. And by huge audiences, I don't mean like just theaters full of people, but like, each group of people would be massive, right? You bring the whole family, right? And I think that was my experience growing up, was my whole family going to watch E.T. and everybody walking out crying, Interestingly, my mom and dad and my brothers took me to go see RoboCop. I was way too young to see that, but I loved it. And I think as I got older, I started getting into indie film, and I started really getting into socially conscious film, and really wanting to find people that looked like me and see better representations of people of color on the screen. And when I finally started seeing like queer people of color on the screen, I started thinking to myself, well, this is really cool. I want to do that. And I think that my intention was like at the time to kind of make like my queer brown Reservoir Dogs, or my queer brown, or make my Greg Araki film, right? But then of course, what do? I do it and I put queer people and brown people and black people front and center, and I end up wanting to make a Spielberg film. Like I still want to make something that's like big and emotional, even though all I have is like $800 to make a movie, right? And so what's interesting is no matter what movie I've made or have done or directed, and I've written everything so far, I've written all my screenplays, no matter how edgy a publication calls it, right? And sometimes when they say edgy, they just mean there's people of color in it, or like the lead character is gay. No matter how edgy it is, I think in the end, I still want to reward people for bringing like all their friends to my movie and making sure all of them have a good time, right? And I don't know what that means about me. I don't know if it means that I'm a people pleaser, or if I'm just like a good host at a party. It just means that's the kind of story I like to tell. And I think when The Secret Art of Human Flight came across my path, the first thing I said was, so this is kind of like that 90s big budget family emotional film. I started thinking of movies that weren't like, big classics or anything, but there was a film called Radio Flyer by Richard Donner, which wasn't great, but, the trailer captured everyone's imagination, because you see this family and like it's about flight. So I started thinking about even like the 80s films. I started thinking about how many movies were about soaring, right? Like why my childhood was so full of blue skies and clouds. And as I read this script and I was like, so is this what this is? Or is that just what I'm taking from it? And it was Grant Rosenmeyer who brought the script to me, who plays the lead. He's the lead producer on the film too. And I had just seen him in Come As You Are, which is a film by Richard Wong. And that's a remake of a Belgian film called Hasta la Vista. And Grant Rosenmeyer was great in that night. And I remember just thinking like, one day I'll meet this guy. And the funny thing is, after Come As You Are came out, like we started following each other on Instagram, and I think we were feeling each other out just through comments, lots of emojis, lots of hands, lots of pow symbols and hearts, and finally we got to meet, and he asked me if I would give the script a read. And it was interesting because what happened was Richard Wong was the one who actually recommended me. He came to me and said, I would love to direct this film, but I don't think I would know how. And I said, what do you mean? Of course you'd know how. You directed Come As You Are. You're a director. You're a film director. And he said, yeah, I just don't know if I have a take on this. And I remember it saying, do I have a take? And as I started walking through the script with the producers at Vanishing Angle and Grant, I realized that just by me talking about like what I thought the film was, just by thinking of this as like that big blue sky movie, literally like this is like a blue sky project. All of a sudden, I can do whatever I wanted because this was my take. It became something that became a little more important to everybody involved, because I think what I was doing was I was exploring loss, because like you said, this is a film about a guy who's grieving his dead wife. And I had just had 3 friends die on me, because this was like smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, and I was kind of going through all the feels. And that's not to say that I was like dragging them into my misery. The truth is, everybody at this point had been in lockdown and suffered through their own version of loss in some way. And yeah, it just became kind of a personal project. And what I thought at that moment was, this is a chance to just sort of explore something, but not be Mr. TMI, because I didn't write this. The script was written by Jesse Orenshine, and this is a chance for me to kind of inject myself into someone else's world. So it was interesting, right? Because like here I was coming, just like having finished Bitter Melon, which was so personal and so wordy and so just it was like a big therapy session. And Secret Art of Human Flight was a chance to just kind of dive into this world that I knew I wanted to tap into my whole life, but like I've only tapped into it tertiarily or in kind of like facsimiles of it. And here I was kind of just doing it. I'm not saying I was making ET, but it was a lot more akin to what I envisioned one of those family films being.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then when you mention all these movies we grew up watching, it's like, well, the first thing I thought of was just in general, like you mentioned E.T., The Flying. I thought of Never Ending Story, riding that dog dragon thing.
Yeah,
that stuff. No, that's very cool, man. You have made several films as a director, and a lot of them were like, I guess technically micro budget. I don't know the budget for this, and I'm not going to ask because we hate those questions. but it's not like a $200 million movie or anything like that, but the resources are greater. I'm just curious, just from a filmmaking perspective, what was the difference from some of your earlier films versus this one, just in terms of the process and the resources available to you?
I think just on a personal level, I didn't want to feel the difference between the micro budget work and this project, because one thing I said from the beginning, from the earliest talks, when people would say like, well, did you want to be a producer on this? I'm like, no, I actually want you all to be a team of producers who work with me, but you shield me from numbers. I don't want to hear numbers. I don't want to hear how much anyone's getting paid. You just tell me how possible something might be. Even if that means it's like a scale of 1 to 10, it's kind of possible, not possible, or totally possible. But don't tell me that it's like, well, we need $20,000 more to do this crazy idea of yours. And I think what I liked about that was that alone just kind of made it so that way me and our cinematographer, Marcus Menser, were able to just sort of run around and say, wouldn't it be cool if we had a shot like this? And wouldn't it be cool if we had this cliff? Can you find us a cliff? And the great thing is we were in Massachusetts, and the producer on the Vanishing Angle side, Ben Wiesner, he just knew his way around, And this wasn't signaling that we had a much bigger budget, but it just meant a lot to me that I'd say, like, I think we should actually have a cliff, I think we should actually have like let's not CG a sky. Like, we don't want to have like our actor in front of a green screen and just have to deal with making that look real. Can't we just use a real cliff? And he just didn't even bat an eye. He was like, I know exactly where to go, and he brought us there. And I said, could we shoot here? And he's like, I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't think we could shoot here, right? And I know that in retrospect that means, okay, well then they have the budget to do that. But to me, that's no different from being a writer, composer, and actor on Colma the musical, and having written a scene where all of my poetry flies out of my hands and like fills the sky, right? I think all the producers at that moment, regardless of the fact that that was a $15,000 musical shot on DV, still got the shot, And I feel like what the great thing about working with Marcus on Secret Art of Human Flight is, at all times I was like, we need to get the shot, whatever it takes, get the shot.
As the director, you don't necessarily want to have all this other business going on in your mind where it's like you want something or your DP wants something and you're like, oh yeah, I want that too, but I'm also the business guy, so no, we can't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to have that clean break between roles on a set. Let me ask you. So I know that you didn't write this screenplay. Like, was there any difference between directing something that you'd written and something that you had not?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think at any given moment on set, I was reading the script and just thinking to myself, like, do I get this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that I just didn't get it and I was second guessing myself all the time. It's more like I was exercising different muscles, right? And that was a very different feeling for me when I'm used to having written every word and having envisioned every intonation while I wrote that. So that way I knew exactly how to direct the actor to say that, right? I think one of the prime examples is Anna Ishida's monologue in Bitter Melon, right? Like we'd work together on the phone, like and one of the first things she told me when we first met for during I Am a Ghost, she was like, the first thing I need to tell you is I need to be directed. I love direction. I was like, good, because I'm a director. But I didn't realize how much she would actually want to collaborate on syllables down to a syllabic level. A lot of work went into that because she trusted me to know exactly what I wanted, but she knows, and she felt free enough to collaborate with me, and it was a collaboration. But in situations like this, where the writer's not on set, and this was, he wrote it and just kind of gave it to Grant, and it became Grant's thing. Grant Rosenmeyer had this script, and I was free to do my director's take on it, Now, my director's take had scenes that I'd written into it, and I knew exactly how to do those. But when it came to the scenes that had originally been written by Jesse Orenshine into this script, I was kind of treating it as a piece of literature. When I say literature, I mean the difference between something that is meant to be read as literature versus a blueprint, right? And I think for the most part, people see scripts as blueprints because the literature is actually the movie that's done. But I treated the script as literature in the moment, and I would do that with the actors as we would go through the script every day and we would do our lines. And there would be these moments where I would actually step back and say, what does everybody feel? What does everybody think? How much agency do you feel you have right now? What would make you feel like you had that agency? What would make you feel like you would get the desired effect in this scene by talking to this actor in a different way? And it was fun, right? Because I think what happened, for example, Maggie Grace was such a collaborator. She word for word, we would go through all the words that she would say to Ben, to the lead character of Ben, played by Grant Rosenmeyer. And because she had such little time to spend with us, I was kind of worried that she'd be Krusty the Clown in The Simpsons when he's like, okay, I got about 5 minutes, reads a script and then leaves. It was interesting to sit with Maggie Grace and treat this like we were analyzing some book together, like we were in a book club. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe I should have done that with my own work in the past, right? Maybe I wasn't as critical of my past work, but oh well. At least maybe now I'll start doing that now that I finally got to direct someone else's words. But I think there was something kind of magical about this process, which has been a pretty long process, right? It's been about 2 years, right? Because after having shot it, there's the edit. And I'm very grateful to Vanishing Angle and Florida Hill for allowing me to be the editor on this, because I think a lot of people just kind of are afraid of directors who edit, because they thought that I was going to come back with this 6-hour magnum opus. But I think they were also impressed with how ruthless I was with my own cut. I was just cutting stuff left and right. And so that's the act of creation too, right? So what happens is I have this piece in front of me that we've all sculpted together, and I put my take on it. So my take is the lens on top of a script that was written by somebody else. And I remember the first test screening we had in LA, a bunch of people showed up, a bunch of actors and directors and writers and just people in the film industry. I remember the general consensus. Oh, and you saw that cut. The general consensus was like, yeah, no, I like it. It's good. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, cool. Oh, thank God they don't think it's trash. But I'm not like that, right? I feel like, why'd your voice go so high?
I was going to say.
What's with the, I like it. It's like, well, okay. And I remember saying, if you guys are happy with that, that's cool. But I didn't hear anyone say they love it. I would love to hear someone use in their normal register the words "I love it," and I was very grateful that everybody involved was like, okay, well, what do you have in mind? I was like, I want to reshoot something and I want to write a new scene, And I don't want to say what the scenes are just yet, because I do feel like when I watch it now, it feels like a cohesive piece. You can't tell what's new. I think it's really kind of organic in the way it's been incorporated. But I was really happy that when we had our screening for this cut, people got really emotional.
Wow.
People got really emotional like within the first like 5 minutes. Including our cast and crew, right? Like they were getting pretty emotional too. And I was like, okay, see, now I feel good about this, because then we're at the bar afterwards and asking people what they thought, and they were like, I loved it. I was like, that's the register I want. I didn't want the qualified falsetto. At that point, that's when I was like, okay, we've got it. This is the culmination of 2 years of work, everybody pitching in together, and and I'm very happy that everyone trusted me and my vision. And I feel weird saying that, because sometimes I feel like whenever I talk about my vision, I sound like highfalutin. But I'm glad there was one. There is the other side of that too, right? Like sometimes you watch the movies that feel like they were made by committee. This movie could never be that, because it was pretty singular. And I want to call this out. Jesse Orenshine had a pretty oddball script. And I was like, and I remember like at any given time, I was like, do we make it odder or do we ground it more? And I think everybody involved, Grant Rosenmeyer, Paul Raci was really good at like keeping us together just by being him. He was kind of like, he plays Mealworm, the guru. And he was kind of the mealworm on set, Like he was just this good supportive force. And yeah, now when I watch it, I'm not sitting there and thinking like, yeah, I'm really proud of this work that someone else did. I think sometimes sometimes people think I'm going to feel that way about something that's not mine per se, right? But I never felt that way about Colma. Right. Colma is still very much mine, right? Like I get to say that, it's not mine as in it's only mine, but I wrote Colma and I wrote all the music. I didn't direct it, right? And I didn't shoot it. Doesn't mean that it's not mine, right? I share that, and I can still look at that and say that it's mine. So, seeing as how that was the first time I'd done anything that was feature length, maybe that was good training, because here I am on the other end of it, directing for someone else who wrote this, and I still get to say it's mine.
So from every film that you make, you obviously have different experiences and everything has a life of its own. For this one, what did you learn about yourself as an artist, filmmaker?
I think I learned a lot of things, but if I were to think of something that I think is worth sharing, that like could have some value to anybody who might be in the same position as I am, I learned to just get people on my page. And I think it's something that I probably couldn't completely do in the past. And the reason for that is I walked into this whole filmmaking thing with such trepidation, with such insecurity, and I think a lot of us do, a lot of us are insecure because it's a discipline and a field that feeds on our insecurities, right? And the interesting thing about when I think of my career and I think of every film that I've either written or been on set for or directed is my life has been about producers saying like, hey, nice job on the last one, kid, but let me show you how a real movie's made, And then they walk in like they're like in mogul drag, right? And the thing is, being like the young pie-eyed kid I was, I'm like, yes, sir. And a lot of times that means people saying like, you can't do that. You don't do that. Like, like kudos to you for the imagination, kid, but like we don't have the budget for that, or you don't shoot things that way. And I would just take that. I'd say, okay, well, I guess you can't. And then, of course, when the movie finally comes out, I think to myself, I'm like, well, how can someone tell me that they can't be shot that way when I can see it with my eyes? And I've handled cameras. Like I shoot. I'm a shooter. I'm a DP. I do all this stuff in the corporate world. Why can't I bring this into my feature world, my independent film world? So I think what was interesting about walking into this was because I didn't write this, right? Because I didn't write this, all of a sudden, all I saw was you had Florida Hill and Vanishing Angle, two production companies, one headed by Grant Rosenmeyer, who's the lead producer, who made decisions on who the best people would be to tackle this script. And there was something that kind of boosted me a little bit about that. It wasn't like I found a bunch of people who were just willing to help me because like here was some like brown kid who wrote like this funny script. This was like, no, this was a team that was assembled to make the script come to life. And I think what was really cool about that was that every single person was fighting to do the best version of the job they can, and what started echoing for me were like the words from this one panel, and I forgot where it was. It was someone from Variety who said this about me when they were introducing me, referred to me as a mid-career director. And I was like, oh, whoa. I could have sworn it was just like a couple years ago when I was referred to as an emerging director, you know? And to be referred to as a mid-career director, and for having people say that on set, and people who read the deck and the people who read like the lowdown on who's going to be working on The Secret Art of Human Flight, seeing me as a mid-career director, suddenly I felt like I was taking my status in the corporate world and bringing it into this. And I felt like I had the confidence to say like, listen, you got to trust me. I've been doing this for a while. I would never say those words. I would never say, come on, kid, trust me. Let me show you how a real movie's made. I don't know why they all sound like they're like 40s moguls, but I feel like now I realize that I need to tell people that I'm not looking for bosses when I enter a project. I'm not. If you start bossing me around, that's a sign that we're not going to get along. I'm looking for collaborators. I'm looking for people who want to work alongside me, work with me. And by saying that, I'm also saying that I'm not looking for people to boss around. I thought it was so funny. One of the most flattering moments was our makeup artist on Secret Art of Human Flight on Paul Raci's last day, which was a tough day. We were shooting in this prison, and it was just a really emotional day. It was emotional. It was just loaded. You can imagine, like, it was his last day. We were like, oh no, we're never going to see him again. And it was a very emotional scene. And emotions were high. And sometimes people say emotions were high and they just mean like it was like tension. No, there's emotions. People were grieving. And our makeup artist was kind of like, rushing around, like dealing with all these different actors. And she had her makeup assistants with her. And I forgot what happened. Something happened where a bunch of people got in her way, and she was just like, oh, sorry, excuse me. But everybody just kind of like just parted, and they were like, oh, sorry about that. And I was the one to bump into her last. She was like, I am so sorry. I'm like, no, totally. And if you need any help, what do you need? And she stood there and she was like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm just going to go do a touch up on Paul. And she like looked up and she shouted, she goes, this is the nicest movie set I have ever been on. And everyone just started laughing because I really do feel like we had this culture of kindness on set. And a lot of that had to do with not just like this idea that we had to be kind, but we all respected each other. We all saw each other as worthy individuals who have enough experience to do our job right.
So in the past, you've talked to me about traversing all these niche festivals, whether they be, Asian festivals, queer festivals, and whatnot. Talk to me about what over the years has that experience been like?
I feel like if it weren't for the Asian film festivals, Asian American film festivals, and the LGBT film festivals, I wouldn't be here. Because the first time out the door doing anything feature length was Colma the Musical. And the interesting thing about writing that was it wasn't like I wrote the script and the music thinking, wait till the Asian gay people see this. Right. I think what it was I always knew that I wasn't the norm, whether that be, that sexuality or my ethnicity or race. I just knew that no matter where I wasn't going to be the norm. And that means also being an Asian person in gay space. That also means being a gay person in Asian space. So it's not, there's a melange of weirdness within me that I know I'm never going to be able to encapsulate into a single story. So all I can really do is write what I know. So I wasn't actively writing anything for Asian people or for queer people, but when I did, they both came, right? And I think whenever I write a story, people always say things like, well, would you consider making this character white? Would you consider making this person straight? You'd probably get more money for this. You'd probably get to bigger festivals. And I'm just going to say it's one of those things where I feel like if you look at the stuff I've done, which has predominantly people of color and lots of queer people in it and has queer themes. And I say queer because I do feel like I have queer themes in mind, not just gay. Like I don't do anything for respectability. Like Bitter Melon has queer themes. When I do those stories, I really do pride myself in the fact that these stories don't feel like they're trying to educate straight people or educate white people. I feel like these are stories that can be enjoyed by anybody. And if you don't get something, you'll probably just look something up on Wikipedia after. Or if you're part of the new generation, you're probably on your phone during the damn movie anyway, so you're going to look it up in the moment. So good for me because you're educated, I guess. But when it comes to where the films go, right? Because I'm doing this, I'm making these movies that don't necessarily want to handhold you through the experience of being a gay person or being a person of color, limits the audience, right? And I'm grateful for the fact that the Asian American film festivals have always embraced the work that I do And if there happens to be any queer content, then the queer festivals embrace what I do. Woe is me. Woe to the filmmaker who does anything that's both ethnic and gay, because then you're going to have festivals fighting over you. Like, hey, where's the gay love? Come on, where's the Asian love? That's happened to me. It's part of the package, I guess.
I know we've gone a while. I just wanted to ask you one quick thing just to end this. If there is one thing, just a piece of advice, a recommendation to somebody who is wanting to get into filmmaking, early career, mid-career, whatever it may be, what would you say? Or what would you recommend to them?
I wish this was like a concise piece of advice. So I'm just going to talk about, I guess, just my experience lately and how that might relate to anybody or any artist in any part of their career. When I first started, I mean, I'm going full circle because that's what I do. When I first got into filmmaking, I was like concentrating on looking at the works of the youngest directors because I wanted to be a young director. So I was looking at like the Inkwell. Remember the Inkwell?
Yeah, Matty Rich.
Yeah, straight out of Brooklyn, Boys in the Hood, Citizen Kane. I was focusing on that because I was like, well, I want to be one of those, And I think as I got older and I aged out of that bracket, I was like, well, one day I'll make a movie. And so, 4 years later, I got to make one, right? And I was no longer one of the youngest people to do it, and that's okay. But then it became all about like being the first Filipino to do something, or being the first queer Filipino to do something, or making the first Asian American musical. And it was all about these metrics that I was trying to live up to, right? And no matter where I went to create, whether it's my own music or even like a video game, like in the video game sphere, or a movie or a script, I was always comparing myself to other people. And it's hard not to, right? Because a very competitive landscape, like with people when you're in the pitch room, people want comps. They literally say, what are your comps? What are you compared to? Are you Pretty Woman meets Jurassic Park? Cool.
I would watch that.
It's hard. Yeah. I don't even know what that would be. I'll give two anecdotes that tie up what I'm talking about here. It's really easy to recognize that you shouldn't do that, right? We all know that we shouldn't compare ourselves because that's just going to lead to misery. But how do you not do that? How do you not? So I'm not going to say that I have instructions on how to not do that, but I'm going to give two anecdotes that I think might be good provocations to end what I'm talking about. I recently had to do an interview at the Tallgrass Film Festival where someone referred to me as prolific. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad you think I'm prolific. And she was like, yeah, you do like a new thing every year. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, it's been 5 years since my last movie. She was like, well, no, you just did Attack the K release. I said, yeah, but that's like an art piece. That was an installation. She was like, yeah, but you did something. I said, okay, yeah, that's true. She goes, and even still, 5 years in between movies for an independent filmmaker, that's still pretty good. And I said, here's the thing. You're interviewing me because you have this timeline in front of you that you got from IMDb. And you're seeing that I do all these things, and it looks like I'm doing something new every year or every 2 years. What you don't see is the string of failures in between. I'm always trying to do stuff. And the weight will always weigh only on me because I feel all of those stops. I feel the fact that I tried to make a movie called Clockwise about Proposition 8. I wanted to do my political comedy, and that never happened, right? And so what did I do? I did I'm a Ghost. And all people see is that I did Fruit Fly and that I'm a Ghost. But they don't see that I tried to do a political comedy in between because I never finished that. They don't see that in between Bitter Melon and Attack the K release that I tried to do a movie called Super Magic City that was this big musical. Never happened. And so, of course, it weighs on me, but all people see is the IMDb profile. And I told her, I said, my image to you is nothing more than a curated string of my successes that I can publish. But we all have these unfinished projects that make us feel like, boy, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So the second anecdote is when I saw a Facebook post from someone, and I can't say who it is, but I saw a Facebook post from someone who I respect, a filmmaker who I always thought of someone as a filmmaker from our circle who made it. I'm like, oh, man, how does how do I get to be like him? He got into real festivals, meaning he made money, meaning he sold his film, and he got into the sphere where people were looking at his film. He was like in top 10 lists everywhere. And I remember just thinking like, wow, that's so cool. Well, I hope to one day be up where he is. And I saw a post recently where he was saying, you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I'm not where I wanted to be. I'm not. I thought I'd be somewhere else by now. I'm very grateful for everybody around me. Made sure I didn't make all the films that I thought I was going to make. I didn't do all the things that I thought. But you know what, though? I'm happy. And I remember reading that and thinking, yeah, but I never disputed that you were happy. I figured you're probably the happiest. You must be one of the happiest people I know. But I was like, oh, of course, I'm going by his Facebook feed. It's just as curated as my IMDb profile is for that interviewer. And I thought to myself, if this guy who made it, right? This guy who made a Hollywood film, right? If this guy feels the need to like publicly post about how, look, guys, I know I'm not as successful as I thought I'd be, but I'm just like, I'm glad you guys are all here. I'm like, man, he speaks for all of us right now. I think there was this moment of zen I had where I was just like, yeah, you know what? It's really easy to say, I'm not where I am because the fates were against me, or I'm not where I am because someone kind of cheated their way to the top. There's something really liberating and freeing about saying, I'm going to stop blaming someone for not being where I am, and I'm just going to cherish where I actually am. Because the truth is, this is not a big Hollywood film that I just did, but it's still bigger than the film I intended to do. I was going to make another like super micro budget film. I just am where I am, and you are where you are, and that's beautiful. You're still making.
Yeah, man. No, that's great. That is a great perspective and a perfect place to end. Thank you, HP, for coming on to the podcast.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Y'all can find everything about HP at hpmendoza.com. You can find him on the socials at hpmendoza. And if you find yourself in New York in early June, you can watch The Secret Art of Human Flight at the Tribeca Film Festival on June 8th, 9th, and 13th. Go check it out, tribecafilm.com, man. And congrats once again. Definitely open invitation to come back onto this podcast. I'll probably bug you more and more about it, but yeah, man, I'll talk to you offline.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Right, thanks.
All of this will be linked up in the show notes below. And that, my friends, is the National Film Society podcast. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Patrick Epino, EPINO. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this podcast and subscribe and see our smiling faces on YouTube at youtube.com/National Film Society. If you're so inclined, please do leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and also say nice stuff about the show in a review on Apple Podcasts. Music in this episode is provided by Paper Sun. The National Film Society podcast is produced by National Film Society. Duh. That's it.